Hi, Lou here to speak briefly about tabletop game footprints. And this is something that applies only to tabletop games because everything's built into the computer in video games. A footprint is the amount of space the game takes on the table. So there are some games that can be played on people's laps, and others require quite large tables. Sometimes you can get miniaturized versions of games, for example, chess with a very small footprint. On the other hand, something like pitch car can never have a small print. If you don't know what pitch car is, it's a game with lots of wooden tracks where you flick wooden pieces around the track with your fingers in a race. Well, there's got to be room for your fingers and for the wooden pieces and for passing the other players and so on. So you can't really miniaturize it, and it takes a hell of a big footprint. Now, classic games such as chess and Go and checkers tend to have fairly small footprints. Travel games have very small footprints because they're designed to be played in a car. Card games that use a standard deck usually have small footprints, but not always. Canasta has quite a large footprint, for example. Of course, some of these are two-player games, and two-player games naturally tend to have smaller footprints than games for more than two. Now, there's a lot of malleability in games. I have a prototype game, sort of a dungeon crawl, which has a small footprint now, but used to be larger because there were many more spaces on the board. I've gradually, over the course of decades, reduced the number of pieces and reduced the number of spaces on the board and consequently reduced the footprint as well. Microgames such as Ogre and My Dragon Rage had small footprints because everything was made as small as possible to make it as cheap as possible. But the more recent versions of these games are much larger. Dragon Rage edition is from 2011. Collectible card games sometimes have small footprints, sometimes not. Big board games do not have small footprints. The big Euros with all those displays and bits do not have small footprints. Especially card games in general can go either way. But of course, in a card game, you expect to have people sitting around a table. And so it's not a bad thing that the game covers the whole table. So what do you want as a designer? Well, of course, it depends. But you might want to keep perceptions in mind. People may feel that more expensive games require bigger footprints. If you pay a lot of money for a game and it's got a small footprint, you might feel cheated. Other than that, there are obvious advantages to smaller footprints. Of course, something I'm not going to go into, but publishers can have a lot of influence on footprint size because they decide the size of the components in the actually manufactured game. Thanks for listening.